The flash of cameras was so bright, I couldn't see anything except white light and the outline of security guards. My hand trembled as I reached for the velvet rope, and for a split second I heard her voice in my head. "You'll never be pretty enough for any of this." But there I was, stepping onto the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival, wearing a custom Valentino gown that cost more than my family's house, with photographers screaming my name from every direction. 2 weeks earlier, she had called me a delusional nobody who would never amount to anything. Today I was walking past A-list celebrities who nodded at me with recognition. The irony wasn't lost on me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Let me rewind, because if I just started with the red carpet, you'd miss the real story. This wasn't about luck or overnight success. This was about proving wrong someone who spent 18 years convincing me I was invisible. My name is Emma, and I grew up in a small town outside Portland, where everyone knew everyone else's business and nothing interesting ever happened. My sister Sophia was 3 years older than me, and from the moment I could walk, she made it her mission to remind me that I was the less fortunate daughter. Not less loved, mind you, because that would imply our parents showed favoritism. They didn't. They just existed in this bubble where Sophia was the sun, and the rest of us were supposed to orbit around her. Sophia was the kind of beautiful that made people stop talking when she walked into rooms. Blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, green eyes that photographers would later describe as mesmerizing, and this effortless confidence that made everyone want to be near her. She knew it too. She'd known it since she was 12 and started getting modeling offers from agencies in Seattle. By 14, she was doing regional commercials. By 16, she had a contract with a boutique agency and was making more money than my dad. I, on the other hand, looked like what happened when genetics decided to play a cruel joke. Same parents, completely different outcome. Brown hair that refused to hold a curl, hazel eyes that looked muddy in most lighting, and a face that was pleasant enough but forgettable. I wasn't ugly, exactly. I was just ordinary in a family that had produced something extraordinary. The comparison started early. Family friends would coo over Sophia and then look at me with this sympathetic expression, like I was a rescue puppy they felt obligated to pet. "Oh, Emma's so sweet," they'd say, which was code for "she's not much to look at, but at least she has a nice personality." Sophia would smile graciously, and then later, when we were alone, she'd lean over and whisper things like, "Did you see how they looked at you? They feel sorry for you." She wasn't wrong. I could see it in their faces, the way they'd brighten when they talked to Sophia, and then dim slightly when they turned to me. It wasn't mean-spirited, not intentionally, but it was there. The subtle shift in energy that told me I was the consolation prize in this particular genetic lottery. Our parents never corrected it. Mom would beam with pride when people complimented Sophia's looks and then pat my shoulder when they mentioned my grades or my kindness, like those were participation trophies. Dad was worse. He'd introduce Sophia as his beautiful daughter and me as his smart daughter, like we were each only allowed one defining characteristic and beauty trumped intelligence every time. The worst part wasn't the comparisons from strangers. It was how Sophia used them. She'd volunteer me for things she knew I'd hate, like school dances or beach trips, just so she could watch me squirm. She'd loan me clothes that looked incredible on her and terrible on me, then act surprised when they didn't fit right. "Oh, Emma," she'd say with this fake concern, "maybe this style just isn't for you. Have you thought about shopping in different sections?" When I was 13, she convinced me to audition for the school play, Romeo and Juliet. I wanted to be on the tech crew, working lights or sound, something behind the scenes where I could contribute without being seen. But Sophia insisted I try out for acting roles. "You never put yourself out there," she said. "How will you know what you're capable of if you don't try?" I was naive enough to think she was being supportive. I prepared for weeks, memorizing Juliet's balcony scene, practicing in front of my bedroom mirror until I could deliver every line with perfect emotion. The day of auditions, I felt genuinely confident for the first time in my life. I thought maybe this was my moment to shine in something other than academics. Sophia auditioned first. She hadn't prepared at all, hadn't even read the play, but she walked onto that stage like she owned it and delivered an improvised monologue that left the drama teacher speechless. When my turn came, I gave the performance of my life, but it didn't matter. Standing next to the memory of Sophia's natural magnetism, I looked like exactly what I was. A girl trying too hard to be something she wasn't. Sophia got Juliet. Obviously, I got cast as Lady Capulet, Juliet's mother, which meant I spent the entire production watching my sister be beautiful and beloved, while I played a woman whose main purpose was to disapprove of her daughter's choices. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, least of all me. After the final performance, when everyone was congratulating Sophia on her stunning debut, she found me in the costume room where I was helping pack up the accessories. The adults couldn't see us back there, hidden behind racks of period dresses and fake armor. She was still wearing her white Juliet gown, glowing from the stage lights and the adrenaline of applause. "You were good tonight," she said, and for a second I thought she was actually being kind. Then she smiled, and I saw something cold flicker behind her eyes. "But you know what I realized watching you up there? Some people are meant to be looked at, and some people are meant to do the looking. It's not your fault you're in the second category, but maybe it's time you accepted it." I stared at her, not understanding what she was really saying. She adjusted her costume in the mirror, running her fingers through her hair so it fell perfectly around her shoulders. "I'm not trying to be mean, Emma. I'm trying to help you. You'll be so much happier once you stop trying to compete with me and just find your own thing. Something that doesn't involve being in front of people." That was Sophia's gift. She could destroy you while making it sound like she was doing you a favor. She could take your biggest insecurities and dress them up as helpful observations, like she was the only one brave enough to tell you the truth. Everyone else was too polite to say. I went to bed that night, feeling like something inside me had died. Not the rejection of not getting Juliet. I'd expected that. But the realization that my own sister saw me as competition that needed to be eliminated rather than family that deserved support. She didn't want me to succeed. She wanted me to stop trying. The pattern continued through high school. Every time I showed interest in something that might put me in the spotlight, Sophia found a way to discourage me. When I mentioned wanting to take photography classes, she reminded me that visual arts required an eye for beauty, and didn't I think my talents lay elsewhere. When I got excited about joining the debate team, she pointed out that successful debaters needed to command attention, and wasn't I more comfortable in supporting roles? The cruelest part was how she framed it. She never said I was ugly or stupid or worthless. She said I was different, that I had other strengths, that I shouldn't waste my time trying to be something I wasn't. It was manipulation disguised as sisterly advice, and it worked because part of me wanted to believe she was looking out for me. By senior year, I'd internalized every message she'd ever sent me. I was the smart one, the reliable one, the one who worked behind the scenes. I got into Portland State with a full academic scholarship and planned to study business administration because it seemed practical and invisible. I'd convinced myself that I didn't want attention anyway, that I was happier being useful than being seen. Sophia, meanwhile, had been accepted to UCLA with plans to study communications, though everyone knew she was really going there to be discovered. She'd done more modeling work throughout high school, mostly catalog stuff and local commercial spots, but her agency was confident she'd book bigger jobs once she was in Los Angeles. She was 18 and gorgeous and convinced the world was waiting for her. The night before graduation, we were both in my room packing up our childhood belongings. I was methodically folding clothes and labeling boxes while Sophia lounged on my bed, painting her nails and talking about her plans for California. She was wearing this tiny crop top that showed off her perfect abs, and her hair fell in natural waves that I'd spent years trying to recreate with hot rollers and drugstore products. "Are you nervous?" I asked, not looking up from the sweater I was folding. "About moving so far away?" She laughed, but not in a mean way. More like she couldn't imagine why anyone would be nervous about moving to Los Angeles to become famous. "Emma," she said, "some people are born knowing what they're meant to do. I've known since I was little that I was meant to be seen. It's not scary when you're following your destiny." I nodded like I understood, but what I was really thinking was how different we were. She saw herself as destined for greatness, and I saw myself as destined to watch other people achieve it. "What about you?" she asked, blowing on her freshly painted nails. "Are you excited about college?" I shrugged. "It's a good school. The business program has excellent job placement rates. She was quiet for a moment, studying me with this expression I couldn't read. Then she sat up and fixed me with this intense stare that made me uncomfortable. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Something I've never told you before." I nodded, even though every instinct I had was telling me to change the subject. "I used to be jealous of you when we were little." She paused, letting that sink in. "You were always so smart, so good at school, so comfortable just being yourself. I felt like I had to be perfect all the time, because being pretty was the only thing I was better at than you." I stared at her, completely shocked. Sophia had never admitted to being jealous of anyone, let alone me. "But then I realized something," she continued, her voice getting softer. "Being smart is great, but being beautiful opens doors that intelligence can't. People want to look at beautiful things. They want to be around them, photograph them, put them in movies and magazines. Intelligence is useful, but beauty is powerful." She swung her legs over the side of my bed and came to sit next to me on the floor, where I was surrounded by boxes and packing tape. "That's why I've always tried to help you understand your strengths, Emma. Because I could see you wanting things that weren't meant for you, and I knew how much it would hurt when you didn't get them. I was trying to protect you." The words hit me like a physical blow. All those years of discouragement and subtle put-downs, she was claiming they'd been for my own good. That she'd been the wise older sister saving me from disappointment, not the insecure bully I'd sometimes suspected she was. I wanted to argue with her, to point out all the times she'd made me feel small and worthless, but part of me wondered if she was right. Maybe I had been reaching for things that were never meant for me. Maybe she really had been trying to help me avoid the pain of trying and failing. "I'm going to tell you something now," she said, "and I want you to remember it when you're in college and you start getting ideas about changing your major or trying new things." She put her hand on my shoulder and looked me directly in the eyes. "You're never going to be as pretty as me, Emma. That's not an insult, it's just a fact, and the sooner you accept it and focus on what you're actually good at, the happier you'll be." The room was completely silent, except for the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was telling me the sky was blue or grass was green. An obvious truth that only an idiot would try to dispute. "I know that sounds harsh," she continued, "but I'm the only person who loves you enough to say it. Everyone else will let you keep embarrassing yourself, but I care too much to watch you waste your life chasing something you'll never have." She squeezed my shoulder and then went back to her nail polish like the conversation was over. Like she'd just given me valuable life advice instead of confirming every terrible thing I'd ever thought about myself. I finished packing in silence while she talked about her plans for headshots and acting classes and networking events. She was so excited about her future that she didn't seem to notice I'd stopped responding. Or maybe she did notice and just didn't care, because she'd accomplished what she set out to do. She'd made sure I knew my place. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and thinking about what she'd said.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"You're never going to be as pretty as me." The words played on repeat in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. Part of me was devastated because I'd always harbored this secret hope that maybe I was prettier than I thought, that maybe other people saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. But another part of me felt almost relieved. If I was never going to be pretty enough to compete with Sophia, then I could stop trying. I could focus on being smart and reliable and useful without the constant anxiety of wondering if I was attractive enough to deserve attention. There was something liberating about having such low expectations that I couldn't possibly disappoint myself. The next morning at graduation, I watched Sophia give the valedictorian speech that should have been mine. She'd beaten me by 2/10 of a grade point, and I suspected she'd done it on purpose because she couldn't stand the idea of me being the smart one and her being just the pretty one. She wanted both. She wanted everything. She looked radiant up there in her cap and gown, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she talked about chasing dreams and never giving up on yourself. The entire audience was mesmerized, and I could see people in the crowd taking pictures of her instead of their own graduating children. Even at our high school graduation, she was the main event and the rest of us were just background extras. After the ceremony, while everyone was taking family photos and hugging friends, Sophia pulled me aside. She was glowing with the excitement of being the center of attention, and she had this triumphant smile that made my stomach turn. "See," she said, gesturing toward all the people who were still watching her from across the courtyard. "This is what I was talking about. Some people are meant to shine, and others are meant to appreciate the shine. You looked so proud watching me up there, Emma. That's your gift, being able to recognize greatness in others." I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Because maybe she was right and I was better suited to being in the audience than on the stage. Because maybe wanting more than that was just setting myself up for disappointment. 3 months later, I was sitting in my dorm room at Portland State, surrounded by business textbooks and feeling like I was exactly where I belonged. Anonymous, invisible, and safe from the kind of rejection that comes with putting yourself out there. Sophia was in Los Angeles, booking small modeling jobs and going to auditions and posting Instagram photos of herself at trendy restaurants and industry parties. She'd call me sometimes to tell me about her latest casting call, or the agent who wanted to represent her, or the photographer who said she had the perfect look for a major campaign. I'd listen and make supportive sounds while secretly feeling like she was calling to remind me of all the things I'd never be brave enough to attempt. But here's what I didn't know then. While I was sitting in my safe little dorm room convincing myself that mediocrity was wisdom, something was building inside me. Something that would eventually crack open and change everything. Something that Sophia's words had planted without her realizing it. Because when someone tells you that you'll never be pretty enough, smart enough, or talented enough to achieve your dreams, one of two things happens. Either you believe them and spend your life making yourself small, or you decide to prove them so spectacularly wrong that the whole world notices. It would take me 3 more years to figure out which kind of person I was going to be. But the seed was already there, planted by every cruel comment and disguised insult Sophia had ever given me. She thought she was protecting me from disappointment, but what she was really doing was giving me a reason to fight. I just didn't know it yet. My freshman year passed in a blur of accounting classes and economics lectures. I kept my head down, maintained a perfect GPA, and convinced myself that I was happy being the girl nobody noticed. I had a few friends, mostly other business majors who were more interested in discussing market trends than personal drama. We studied together, grabbed coffee between classes, and rarely talked about anything deeper than upcoming exams. It was exactly the kind of low-stakes social life that felt safe after 18 years of living in Sophia's shadow. No competition, no comparisons, no risk of being found wanting. I was just Emma the business student, reliable and unremarkable, and that felt like enough. Sophia's updates from Los Angeles painted a different picture. She'd landed a recurring role as an extra on a popular TV drama, which led to small speaking parts and eventually a minor storyline. She was working constantly, booking commercials and print ads, building what her agent called a solid foundation for bigger opportunities. Her Instagram account had exploded from a few hundred followers to nearly 50,000, mostly photographers and casting directors and fans of the show who'd noticed her. She posted constantly, sharing behind-the-scenes photos from sets, selfies at industry events, and carefully curated glimpses of her glamorous Los Angeles lifestyle. I followed her account like everyone else, watching her transformation from small-town pretty girl to legitimate working actress. Part of me was proud of her success, but a larger part felt confirmed in my decision to stay safely ordinary. Look what happened when you reached for more than you deserved. You either got it and became someone like Sophia, beautiful and successful but also calculating and cruel, or you failed spectacularly and everyone got to watch. During winter break of my sophomore year, Sophia came home for the first time since leaving for college. She'd been too busy with work to visit during summer or Thanksgiving, but her show was on hiatus and she had 2 weeks off. The moment she walked through our front door, it was like someone had turned up the brightness in our house. She looked impossibly sophisticated in designer clothes I recognized from magazines, her hair longer and shinier than ever, her skin glowing with the kind of health that comes from expensive facials and California sunshine. Everyone wanted to hear her stories. Mom and Dad peppered her with questions about famous people she'd met and sets she'd worked on. Even our neighbors started dropping by, wanting to see how little Sophia Miller was doing in Hollywood. She held court in our living room every evening, sharing carefully edited anecdotes about her work and her life. She made it sound glamorous but not intimidating, successful but not unattainable. Like she was still our Sophia, just living a slightly more interesting version of the life we'd all expected her to have. I listened from the kitchen, pretending to help Mom with dinner, while really just absorbing the sound of Sophia's voice and everyone's laughter. She was funnier than I remembered, more confident, more comfortable with being the center of attention. Los Angeles had polished her into the person she'd always been meant to become. On her third night home, after everyone else had gone to bed, she found me in my old bedroom reading a marketing textbook. She knocked on the doorframe and then came in without waiting for permission, settling cross-legged on my bed, like we were still teenagers having late-night conversations. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "College suits you, you seem more comfortable with yourself." I marked my place in the textbook and set it aside. "Thanks, you look incredible, like actually famous." She laughed and ran her fingers through her hair, a gesture I recognized from childhood. She'd always done that when she was pleased with a compliment. "Not yet," she said. "But I'm getting there. My agent thinks I'll book something really big this pilot season. A series regular role on a network show." "That's amazing," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything between us, I was genuinely happy for her success. "What about you?" she asked. "Still planning to graduate and get some boring corporate job?" The question stung a little, but I'd grown used to Sophia's casual dismissiveness about my choices. "I'm thinking about marketing, actually. Maybe advertising, it's more creative than I expected." She nodded like she was considering this. "That could be good for you," she said. "Behind-the-scenes creative work, using your brain instead of trying to be something you're not." There it was. The subtle reminder of my limitations, delivered like helpful career advice. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that came whenever Sophia reminded me of my place in the world. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of accepting her assessment and changing the subject, I heard myself say, "Actually, I've been thinking about taking some film classes. Just as electives. I'm curious about how the industry works." Sophia's expression shifted slightly. Not obviously, but I'd spent enough years studying her face to recognize the micro changes that meant she was calculating her response. "Film classes," she said. "Like filmmaking, just theory stuff," I said quickly. "History analysis, that kind of thing. I'm not trying to be an actress or anything." The relief on her face was so obvious that it was almost insulting. "Oh good," she said. "I was worried you were having some kind of quarter-life crisis and thinking about following me out to LA. She laughed like the idea was absurd, and I laughed too because what else was I supposed to do? But something had shifted in that moment. Something small but significant. For the first time in my life, I'd mentioned having an interest in her world, and her first instinct had been panic that I might actually pursue it. Which made me wonder what she was really afraid of. "You know," she continued, settling back against my pillows, "I've learned so much about the industry since I've been out there. About what it takes to make it, who succeeds and who doesn't. It's not just about talent or even looks, though those obviously matter. It's about having this specific kind of magnetism that draws people to you. You either have it or you don't." She was looking at me while she said it, her green eyes serious and intent. Like she was trying to communicate something important. "I've seen so many beautiful, talented people fail because they just didn't have that special quality that makes audiences connect with them. And I've seen people who weren't traditionally beautiful become huge stars because they had something else. Charisma, I guess. Screen presence." I nodded like I was following her logic, but what I was really thinking was how she managed to make every conversation about the entertainment industry sound like a warning specifically designed for me. "The point is," she said, leaning forward slightly, "it's brutal out there. Even for people who seem perfect for it. I can't imagine how much harder it would be for someone who wasn't built for that kind of scrutiny." Message received. Stay in your lane, Emma. Don't reach for things that aren't meant for you. But here's the thing about being told repeatedly that you can't do something. Eventually, if you have even a tiny spark of defiance left in you, you start wondering if the person telling you that might be wrong. Not because you necessarily believe you can do it, but because you start questioning their motives for wanting you to believe you can't. That night, after Sophia went back to her room, I lay in bed thinking about the film classes I'd mentioned almost by accident. I hadn't been seriously considering them before, but now I couldn't stop thinking about them. Not because I wanted to become an actress or director, but because I wanted to understand the thing that Sophia was so determined to keep me away from. The next morning, I looked up the course catalog for Portland State's film department. They offered everything from introductory courses about movie history to advanced classes in screenwriting and production. Most of them were open to students from other majors as long as they met the prerequisites. I found myself reading course descriptions with genuine interest for the first time since starting college. Film theory and criticism. The history of cinema. Introduction to screenwriting. They sounded fascinating in a way that marketing principles and business statistics never had. More than that, they sounded like things I might actually be good at. I'd always been a good writer, and I'd spent my entire life watching movies and television with the kind of analytical eye that came from being a perpetual observer. Maybe there was a place for me in the entertainment industry that didn't require me to be in front of cameras or compete with people like Sophia. When I got back to school after winter break, I signed up for Introduction to Film Studies as one of my electives. It met twice a week in a small classroom in the Arts Building, and from the moment I walked in, I felt like I'd found something I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. The professor was a woman in her 50s who'd worked as a script supervisor in Hollywood before becoming an academic. She talked about movies like they were literature, breaking down the visual language of cinema and the way directors used color and sound and movement to tell stories. It was the first time I'd ever thought about film as an art form, rather than just entertainment. More importantly, it was the first time in my academic career that I felt genuinely excited about learning something. I found myself staying after class to ask questions, checking out every book on the reading list from the library, and watching the assigned films multiple times to catch details I'd missed. My professor noticed. After a few weeks, she started recommending additional movies and articles, encouraging me to dig deeper into the theoretical frameworks we were studying. She suggested I consider taking more film classes, maybe even pursuing a minor in cinema studies. The idea terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. It would mean acknowledging that I was interested in something adjacent to Sophia's world, something that might put me in competition with her sphere of influence. But it also felt like the first authentic interest I'd ever developed, the first thing that made me want to work harder instead of just hoping to get by. I didn't tell Sophia about the film class when we talked on the phone. I told myself it was because it wasn't relevant to her life, but really it was because I wasn't ready to hear her opinion about my new interest. I needed time to figure out how I felt about it before she told me how I should feel about it. Spring semester I signed up for 2 more film classes: History of World Cinema and Introduction to Screenwriting. My academic advisor was puzzled by the sudden shift away from business electives, but she didn't discourage me. My grades were strong enough that I had room to explore other interests. The screenwriting class changed everything. We started with basic structure and character development, but within a few weeks we were writing our own short scripts. I discovered that I had an intuitive understanding of story beats and dialogue, that I could create characters who felt real and situations that felt compelling. My first script was a quiet drama about 2 sisters with complicated relationships with their parents. I didn't realize until after I'd written it how much of my own experience I'd poured into it, how much of Sophia and me was reflected in the dynamic between the characters. When we did table reads in class, having other students perform my dialogue out loud, I felt a rush of excitement I'd never experienced before. These were my words, my characters, my story, and they were working. People were laughing at the funny parts and getting emotional during the dramatic moments. After class, my professor asked if I'd ever considered changing my major to film studies. The suggestion caught me completely off guard. I'd been thinking of my film classes as interesting diversions, not potential career paths. "You have a natural understanding of character and conflict," she said. "And your writing shows a level of emotional sophistication that takes most students years to develop. I think you could be really successful if you decided to pursue screenwriting seriously." I walked back to my dorm in a daze, her words playing on repeat in my head. For the first time in my life, Someone was telling me I had talent for something that mattered, something that could lead to a real career doing work I actually cared about. But pursuing screenwriting would mean admitting that I wanted to be part of the entertainment industry. It would mean competing directly or indirectly with people like Sophia. It would mean risking failure in a field where she was already succeeding. Most terrifying of all, it would mean believing that I might be capable of more than I'd always been told I was capable of. That night, I called my parents to tell them about my professor's suggestion. I expected them to be concerned about my abandoning business school for something as impractical as screenwriting. Instead, they seemed genuinely intrigued. "Your writing was always beautiful," Mom said. "Remember those stories you used to write in elementary school? We still have them somewhere, and you've always been good at understanding people," Dad added. "What makes them tick, what they want. That seems like it would be useful for writing characters." Their support surprised me. I'd assumed they'd react the same way they always had when I'd shown interest in creative pursuits, with gentle discouragement disguised as practical concern. But maybe they'd just been following Sophia's lead all those years, accepting her assessment of my limitations because she was the one who seemed to understand the creative world. I didn't mention the conversation to Sophia during our weekly phone calls. I told myself I was still figuring things out, that there was no point in discussing something that might not lead anywhere. But really I was protecting this new part of myself from her judgment until I felt strong enough to defend it. By the end of sophomore year, I decided to double major in business and film studies. It felt like a reasonable compromise, giving me practical skills while also pursuing something I was passionate about. More importantly, it felt like the first decision I'd made, based on what I wanted rather than what other people expected of me. I spent that summer working at a marketing firm in Portland, but I also wrote 2 more short scripts and read everything I could find about the film industry. I was starting to understand how movies got made, who made the decisions about what stories got told, and where writers fit into the process. What I discovered was that successful screenwriters weren't necessarily the most beautiful or charismatic people. They were the ones who understood human nature and could translate that understanding into compelling stories. They were observers and analysts and storytellers, roles that suddenly seemed perfectly suited to someone who'd spent her entire life watching from the sidelines. For the first time since graduating high school, I felt genuinely excited about my future. I was developing skills that felt meaningful, pursuing work that engaged my mind and creativity, and building towards something that could become a real career. I still wasn't ready to tell Sophia about any of it, but I was getting ready to stop caring whether she approved or not. The shift happened gradually, so subtly that I didn't notice it until it was already complete. Somewhere between my first film class and my second screenwriting workshop, I'd stopped defining myself primarily as Sophia's less attractive sister. I was becoming Emma the writer, Emma the film student, Emma the person with her own interests and ambitions. It wasn't that I'd suddenly become confident about my appearance or stopped noticing the ways Sophia was more conventionally beautiful than me. But those things had stopped being the most important facts about who I was. I had other qualities now, other ways of measuring my worth, that had nothing to do with how I looked standing next to her. When junior year started, I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised everyone around me. I took advanced screenwriting classes, film history seminars, and even a course in film production that taught basic camera and editing techniques. My professors started treating me like a serious student rather than someone just fulfilling elective requirements. I wrote constantly. Short scripts, feature-length treatments, character studies, dialogue exercises. Some of it was terrible, but some of it was good, and occasionally I'd write something that felt genuinely special. Those moments when I'd craft a scene or create a character that felt completely alive and real were better than any compliment I'd ever received about my appearance. My business classes started feeling like obligations rather than my primary focus. I still maintained good grades and completed all my requirements, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. My professors noticed the shift, but they didn't seem concerned as long as my work remained solid. It was during this period that I started thinking seriously about what I wanted to do after graduation. The original plan had been to get a corporate job, work my way up through some company's marketing department, and build a stable, unremarkable career. But now I was imagining different possibilities. I could move to Los Angeles and try to break into the film industry as a screenwriter. I could apply to graduate programs in screenwriting or film studies. I could even try to get entry-level jobs at production companies or talent agencies, learning the business from the inside while working on my own scripts. All of these options terrified me, but they also excited me in a way that corporate marketing positions never had. They were risky and uncertain and exactly the kind of reaching beyond my supposed limitations that Sophia had always warned me against. But for the first time in my life, I was starting to think that maybe Sophia didn't know everything about what I was capable of. Maybe her assessments of my potential said more about her need to maintain her position as the successful sister than about my actual abilities. The thought was dangerous and thrilling and completely contrary to everything I'd believed about myself for 20 years. I was getting ready to find out which one of us was right. The phone call came during my final semester of college, while I was hunched over my laptop in the library, working on my thesis screenplay. It was Sophia, which wasn't unusual, but something in her voice was different, sharper, more urgent than her typical casual check-ins about family gossip in her latest auditions. "I just heard something interesting," she said without preamble. "From Jessica Chen, you know her, right? She went to our high school, couple years younger than you. She's working at a production company in LA now." I remembered Jessica vaguely, quiet girl, honor roll student, someone who'd existed in the background of our high school experience the same way I had. I made a non-committal sound while I minimized the document I'd been working on. "She mentioned seeing your name on some script that came through their office. Said you're a writer now, something about a family drama that made it through their first round of reviews." The blood drained from my face. 3 months earlier, I'd submitted my thesis script to a contest that promised industry exposure for the winners. It was called Shifting Light, a semi-autobiographical story about two sisters whose relationship changes when the younger one discovers her own talents. I'd never expected anything to come of it, certainly never imagined it would make its way to an actual production company. Sophia's silence stretched across the phone line, heavy with expectation. When I didn't respond immediately, she continued in that carefully controlled tone she used when she was furious but trying not to show it. "Were you planning to tell me that you're trying to break into my industry? That you've been writing scripts and submitting them to companies without mentioning it to anyone in the family?" Her industry, like she owned all of entertainment, like my wanting to write somehow encroached on her territory. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the automatic shame response that came whenever Sophia expressed disapproval of my choices. "It's just a school project," I said weakly. "My thesis, I needed to submit it somewhere for the grade requirements. A school project that professional readers are taking seriously enough to pass up the chain." Jessica said they're actually considering optioning it. "Emma, do you understand what that means?" I did understand, which was exactly why I hadn't told her about any of it. An option meant a company would pay me for the exclusive right to develop my script into a film. It meant real money, real recognition, and a real foot in the door of the industry where Sophia had been working to establish herself for the past 4 years. More than that, it meant someone other than my film professors thought I might actually have talent worth investing in. "Look," Sophia continued, her voice softening into that fake concerned tone I recognized from childhood, "I'm not trying to discourage you. I think it's great that you're exploring creative writing, but you need to understand how this business really works before you get your hopes up." There it was. The familiar refrain dressed up as sisterly wisdom. The gentle reminder that I should know my place, and stick to it. "The thing is," she said, "getting an option doesn't mean anything will actually happen with your script. Companies option hundreds of projects every year that never get made. It's like buying lottery tickets. They spend small amounts of money to hold on to properties just in case, but 99% of them die in development." She was probably right about the statistics, but what bothered me was how quickly she'd moved from shock that I was writing to explaining why my writing wouldn't matter. "And even if something does happen with it, the process is going to change everything about your script. They'll bring in established writers to do rewrites. They'll change your characters, your story, your entire vision. By the time it gets to screen, if it ever does, you probably won't even recognize it." I found myself nodding even though she couldn't see me, falling back into the old pattern of accepting her expertise without question, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was because I'd spent 2 years studying the industry myself, learning about how films actually got made, and what writers' roles were in the process. Or maybe it was because I'd finally found something I was good at, and didn't want to let go of it without a fight. Actually, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. I know about development processes. We studied that in my screenwriting classes, but even if the final product is different from my original script, it's still my story that attracted their attention. My characters, my dialogue, my understanding of the relationship between these sisters. There was a pause. When Sophia spoke again, her tone had shifted back to that sharp edge from the beginning of the call. Screenwriting classes, how many film classes have you been taking exactly? I could have lied, could have downplayed my involvement, made it sound like a casual hobby instead of a serious academic focus. That would have been the safe choice, the one that kept peace between us and maintained the dynamic we'd established over 2 decades. Instead, I told her the truth. I'm double majoring in business and film studies. I've taken 12 film classes over the past 2 years, including advanced screenwriting workshops. I've written 8 scripts, and 3 of them have placed in various contests. Shifting Light isn't just a school project, it's the best thing I've ever written, and if someone wants to option it, I'm going to let them. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard Sophia take a breath, the kind of deep inhale someone takes when they're trying to control their temper. 8 scripts, she said finally. You've written 8 scripts without mentioning it to me once. I haven't mentioned a lot of things, I said, feeling bolder than I had any right to feel. You never ask about my classes or my interests unless they relate to something happening in your life.
Why would I bring up screenwriting when you've spent years telling me I should focus on things that don't require being in front of people? Emma, she said, her voice taking on that patient, explaining tone that made my skin crawl, I never said you couldn't be creative. I said you should be realistic about your strengths and limitations. There's a difference between writing as a hobby and thinking you can actually make a career out of it, but that's exactly what you did. I pointed out. You decided you could make a career out of acting and moved to Los Angeles to pursue it. Why is it realistic when you do it, but delusional when I do it? Because I'm built for this industry and you're not, she snapped, dropping the patient pretense entirely. Because I understand what it takes to succeed here, and you don't. Because I've been working in this business for 4 years while you've been taking college classes and writing scripts that no one will ever see, except someone is seeing them, I said quietly. Someone thinks they're good enough to option. That seemed to stop her cold. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath it. Fine, she said, you want to learn about this industry the hard way. Go ahead, take their option money, and see what happens next. See how long it takes before you realize that having one script that caught someone's attention doesn't make you a real writer. What makes someone a real writer? I asked. Success, she said, without hesitation. Actual produced credits, not just options that go nowhere. Recognition from people who matter, not just contest judges and college professors. The ability to make a living from your writing, instead of just getting occasional small payments for scripts that sit in development hell. She paused, and when she continued, her voice had that fake kindness again. I'm not saying this to be cruel, Emma. I'm saying it because I care about you and I don't want to see you get hurt when you realize how hard this really is. You're smart and you're a good writer, but this business destroys people who are much more talented and experienced than you are. Maybe, I said, but I'd rather try and fail than spend my whole life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. After we hung up, I sat in the library staring at my laptop screen for a long time. The conversation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, not because of what Sophia had said, but because of how familiar it all felt. The same dismissive tone, the same concerned warnings, the same underlying message that I should know my place and stay in it. But this time, instead of accepting her assessment and adjusting my expectations accordingly, I found myself getting angry. Actually angry, not just hurt or disappointed, but furious at the way she consistently tried to make me smaller whenever I showed signs of wanting to grow. 2 weeks later, I got the call from the production company. They wanted to option Shifting Light for 18 months with the possibility of renewal. The money wasn't life-changing, but it was real.
More importantly, they wanted to meet with me about developing it further, possibly as a limited series rather than a feature film. I accepted before I could second-guess myself. That night, I called my parents to tell them the news. They were thrilled, genuinely excited in a way that reminded me why I'd loved them before I'd learned to see myself through Sophia's eyes. Mom cried a little, and Dad kept asking me to explain exactly what an option meant and whether this could lead to more opportunities. "Did you tell Sophia yet?" Mom asked after we'd gone through all the details twice. "Not yet," I said. "I wanted to tell you guys first. She'll be so excited for you," Mom said with complete confidence. "Having someone in the family who understands the business will be so helpful as you navigate all this." I made appropriate agreeing sounds, but what I was thinking was how different my mother's assumptions were from reality. Sophia wasn't going to be helpful or excited. She was going to be threatened and probably furious that I'd moved forward without her permission or guidance. I was right. When I called to tell her about the option, her first response was a long silence, followed by a tight congratulations that sounded like it was being squeezed through gritted teeth. "That's great news," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but great. "I hope you're prepared for what comes next. Development is going to be much more complicated than just writing a script and submitting it to contests." "I know it will be," I said. "That's why I'm planning to move to Los Angeles after graduation. To be closer to the process and learn how everything works." Another silence. This one felt dangerous. "You're moving to Los Angeles," she repeated. "The production company offered to help me find representation and connect me with other writers who could mentor me." It seemed like the logical next step. "Emma," she said, her voice taking on that deadly calm quality that meant she was about to say something that would hurt. "You can't just move to LA and expect to become a successful screenwriter because you sold one script to a company that options everything that comes across their desk. This isn't Portland State, where professors blow sunshine up your ass because you're better than the other business majors who are taking film classes for easy credits." The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. She wasn't even pretending to be supportive anymore. "This is a real industry with real professionals who've been doing this work for decades," she continued. "People who've studied at prestigious schools and worked their way up through the system and earned their right to be here. You think you can just skip all of that because you wrote something based on our family drama." That last part hit exactly where she'd intended it to. My script wasn't just family drama. It was a complex story about identity and competition and the ways people can love and damage each other simultaneously. But she'd reduced it to gossip, like I'd written some thinly veiled tell-all instead of a genuine piece of storytelling. "You don't even know what you don't know," she said. "You don't understand how meetings work, how pitches work, how to take notes and incorporate feedback. You don't know anyone. You don't have relationships with agents or producers or other writers. You're going to show up here with one option deal and expect people to take you seriously." "Maybe they will," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Maybe the work will speak for itself." Sophia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The work never speaks for itself, Emma. Not here. Success in this industry is about who you know, how you present yourself, whether people want to work with you. It's about being the kind of person that executives and directors want to spend time with, want to collaborate with, want to put in front of investors and network executives." She paused, letting that sink in. "It's about being someone people remember and want to see again. Someone who makes them feel excited about their project just by being associated with it." Do you understand what I'm saying? I understood exactly what she was saying. That I wasn't pretty enough, charming enough, or magnetic enough to succeed in her world. That talent might get me in the door, but I didn't have the personal qualities necessary to stay there. It was the same message she'd been sending me for 22 years, just applied to a new context. "Look," she said, softening her tone again, "I'm not trying to crush your dreams. I'm trying to prepare you for reality so you don't get blindsided when things don't work out the way you're expecting them to." "What if things do work out?" I asked quietly. "Then I'll be the first person to congratulate you," she said. "But Emma, you have to understand that for every person who makes it in this business, there are thousands who don't. Thousands of people who were just as talented and worked just as hard, but didn't have that extra something that separates professionals from amateurs. What's the extra something? I asked, though I already knew her answer. Star quality, she said. The ability to walk into a room and make everyone else fade into the background. Natural charisma that makes people want to listen to you, work with you, be around you. It's not something you can learn or fake. You either have it or you don't. And you don't think I have it. The pause before her answer told me everything I needed to know. I think you have other qualities that are valuable, she said finally. You're smart and observant, and you understand people. Those are great skills for a writer, but they're not the same as the kind of presence that makes people want to bet their careers on you. After we hung up, I walked around campus for hours, turning her words over in my mind. Part of me wanted to believe she was wrong, that she was just threatened by my success, and trying to undermine my confidence. But another part of me wondered if she was right, if I was setting myself up for humiliation by thinking I could succeed in a world where she was already established. I thought about all the times I'd watched her command attention in rooms full of people, the way conversations naturally centered around her, the way even strangers seemed drawn to her energy. Then I thought about myself in group settings, how I tended to fade into the background, how people often forgot I was there until I spoke up. Maybe she was right, maybe talent wasn't enough, and I didn't have the personal magnetism necessary to make it in Los Angeles. Maybe I should stay in Portland, get a regular job, and keep writing as a hobby instead of risking everything on a dream that was probably too big for someone like me. But then I remembered the feeling of seeing my words performed by actors, the rush of creating characters and situations that felt real and meaningful. I remembered my professor's encouragement, the contest wins, the phone call from the production company, telling me they wanted to option my work. Most of all, I remembered the look on Sophia's face during winter break, when I'd mentioned taking film classes. The flash of panic that she'd tried to hide, the immediate need to discourage me from pursuing anything that might put me in competition with her world. If I was really as hopeless as she claimed, why was she so worried about me trying? That night, I made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I was going to Los Angeles. I was going to take the meetings the production company offered to arrange. I was going to find representation and learn how the industry really worked and see if my writing was good enough to build a career on. If Sophia was right, and I failed spectacularly, at least I'd know for sure, instead of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. If she was wrong, well, that would be interesting for both of us. I graduated summa cum laude with degrees in business and film studies. My parents came to the ceremony, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage. Sophia was supposed to be there too, but she'd had to cancel last minute because of a callback for a recurring role on a new series. Her absence felt symbolic somehow. She'd been the center of attention at our high school graduation, but this achievement was entirely mine. My degrees, my honors, my future stretching ahead of me full of possibilities I'd chosen for myself. 2 weeks after graduation, I loaded everything I owned into my Honda Civic and drove south toward Los Angeles. The production company had helped me find a small apartment in Los Feliz, and I had enough money saved from my option deal and college jobs to survive for 6 months while I tried to establish myself. The drive took 14 hours, and I used every minute of it to think about what I was doing and why. By the time I saw the Hollywood sign rising above the freeway, I'd convinced myself that this was either the best decision I'd ever made, or the biggest mistake of my life. I was about to find out which one. Los Angeles was overwhelming in ways I hadn't anticipated. The sheer size of it, the traffic, the way everyone seemed to be performing some version of themselves, even in casual interactions. I'd expected it to be different from Portland, but I hadn't prepared for how different I would feel in it. My apartment was tiny but clean, in a complex full of other people in their 20s, who'd moved to LA with dreams of making it in entertainment. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' phone calls and audition rehearsals, which made me feel less alone even when I didn't know anyone. The first few weeks were dedicated to practical things. Getting a California driver's license, finding a grocery store, figuring out how to navigate the freeways without having a panic attack. I also got a part-time job at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, partly for the money, but mostly because it gave me a reason to talk to people and feel like I was participating in the city, instead of just hiding in my apartment. My first meeting with the production company was scheduled for the end of my second week in town. I'd been nervous about it since accepting their invitation, but being in Los Angeles made it feel real in a way that was both exciting and terrifying. The offices were in a sleek building in West Hollywood, all glass and steel and modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. I wore the nicest outfit I owned, a navy blazer and pencil skirt that had seemed professional in Portland, but felt conservative and outdated surrounded by all the carefully curated LA style. The meeting was with Sarah Chen, a development executive who'd been one of the champions of my script during their review process. She was probably 10 years older than me, impeccably dressed, and radiated the kind of effortless confidence that made me immediately aware of every awkward thing about my own presence. But she was also genuinely enthusiastic about shifting light, and had thoughtful questions about my intentions for the characters and themes. We talked for over an hour about the story, about my background, about my goals for the project, and for my career generally. It felt like a real conversation between professionals, not a polite meeting someone was taking out of obligation. By the end of it, I was actually excited instead of just nervous.
The next step, Sarah explained, was for me to meet with some agents who might be interested in representing me. She'd already reached out to a few people who specialized in working with emerging writers, and they were willing to take meetings based on the strength of shifting light and her recommendation. Agent meetings were different from development meetings, less collaborative, more evaluative. Like job interviews, where both sides were trying to figure out if they wanted to work together. I met with 4 different agencies over the course of 2 weeks, and each meeting taught me something new about how the business worked and what my place in it might be. The agent I ultimately signed with was named Marcus Rivera. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that reminded me of my favorite professors in college. His office was smaller than the others I'd visited, and his client list wasn't as impressive, but he was the only one who talked about my career like he was genuinely invested in building it, rather than just collecting commission on whatever deals came along. More importantly, he didn't seem concerned about whether I had enough personal magnetism to succeed. He was interested in my writing, my ideas for future projects, and my willingness to work hard and take feedback, all things I knew I could deliver. Having representation changed everything. Suddenly I was getting sent scripts to read for potential rewrite work, meeting with other writers who could become collaborators, learning about upcoming projects that might need someone with my particular skills and sensibilities. It was exactly the opposite of what Sophia had predicted. Instead of being dismissed because I wasn't charming enough or connected enough, I was being welcomed into a community of people who cared more about the quality of my work than the force of my personality. Don't get me wrong, Los Angeles was still intimidating and competitive, and full of people who were more beautiful and confident than I would ever be. But it was also full of writers and directors and producers who understood that making good movies and television required more than just charisma. It required people who could tell stories that mattered, who could create characters that felt real, who could find the emotional truth in any situation. Those were things I could do, things I was actually good at. 6 months after moving to LA, I sold my second script to a streaming service. It was another family drama, this one focused on 3 generations of women navigating changing expectations about careers and relationships. The sale was small but legitimate, the kind that established me as a working writer rather than just someone who'd gotten lucky once. I called my parents to tell them the news, and they were so excited they put me on speakerphone so they could both celebrate at the same time. Their pride was uncomplicated and genuine, exactly what I'd needed to hear. I didn't call Sophia, we'd barely spoken since I'd moved to Los Angeles, just a few perfunctory text exchanges about family events and holidays. I told myself I was too busy to maintain regular contact, but really I wasn't ready to deal with whatever her reaction to my continued success would be. Instead, she called me. I heard about the streaming deal, she said without preamble. Marcus Rivera represents a friend of mine, and word gets around. Her tone was neutral, which somehow felt more ominous than if she'd been obviously angry or fake enthusiastic. Congratulations, she continued.
2 sales in 6 months is impressive for someone who's never worked in the industry before. Thank you, I said cautiously. I've been thinking about our conversation before you moved out here, she said, about what it takes to succeed in this business. I may have been too focused on the acting side of things. Writing is different, more about the work itself and less about personal presence. It felt like she was working up to something, but I couldn't tell what. The thing is, she continued, I've been getting more interested in producing lately. Moving behind the camera, developing projects instead of just performing in them, and I've been looking for material that would be good vehicles for transitioning into that role. My stomach dropped. I could see exactly where this was going. I read Shifting Light, she said. Sarah Chen sent it to me when she heard we were related. It's good, Emma, really good. The kind of story that could attract serious talent if it was developed properly. I waited for the other shoe to drop. I'd like to come on board as a producer, she said. Use my industry relationships to help get it made with the right director and cast. I know people who could take this from a small streaming project to something with real awards potential. The offer was tempting and horrifying in equal measure. Working with Sophia would mean access to her network, her experience, and her understanding of how to navigate industry politics. But it would also mean giving up the independence I'd fought so hard to establish, letting her back into the center of something I'd built without her help. More than that, it would mean accepting that she was right about needing her connections to succeed, that my work alone wasn't enough to reach the highest levels of the industry. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, she replied, but don't take too long. Windows of opportunity in this business open and close quickly, and timing is everything. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment staring out at the Los Angeles skyline and trying to figure out what I actually wanted. Working with Sophia could accelerate my career in ways that would take years to achieve on my own. But it would also change the fundamental nature of my success, making me dependent on her in exactly the way she'd always insisted I needed to be. The question was whether I was confident enough in my own abilities to turn down her help, or whether I was still too afraid of failure to risk going it alone. I had 2 weeks to decide, and I knew that whatever choice I made would determine not just the fate of this one project, but the entire trajectory of my career and my relationship with my sister. For the first time since moving to Los Angeles, I wasn't sure which way I was going to jump. I turned her down, not immediately, but after 3 sleepless nights weighing every possible outcome, I called Sophia and politely declined her offer to produce Shifting Light. Her silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Fine, she said finally. But when this project dies in development, hell because you don't have the connections to push it forward, remember that I offered to help. 2 months later, Netflix greenlit Shifting Light as a limited series with a $7 million budget. The director they attached was someone I'd never heard of, but whose previous work had won awards at Sundance. The cast they assembled included 2 Emmy nominees and a rising star who'd just been featured on the cover of Vanity Fair. None of it happened because of Sophia's connections. It happened because Sarah Chen believed in the project and had relationships with people who mattered. It happened because my script was strong enough to attract talent who wanted to be associated with it. It happened because sometimes the work really does speak for itself. Sophia didn't congratulate me when the news broke. She didn't call, text, or acknowledge it at all. But I heard from friends back home that she'd posted on Instagram about how proud she was of her little sister's success, complete with throwback photos of us as kids and hashtags about family support. The performance of pride for public consumption while maintaining complete private silence. Production began 8 months later. I'd been hired as a consulting producer, which meant I was involved in casting decisions, script revisions, and day-to-day creative choices. It was my first time on a professional film set, and everything about it felt surreal. Watching actors perform my dialogue, seeing my imagined scenes brought to life by talented directors and cinematographers, being treated as someone whose opinion mattered in rooms full of industry veterans. The experience taught me that Sophia had been wrong about more than just whether I could succeed. She'd been wrong about what success would look like. I didn't need to be the most charismatic person in the room to have influence. I needed to be the person who understood the story best, who could articulate the emotional core of each scene, who could solve problems when the script wasn't working. Those were skills I'd been developing without realizing it, not just in my screenwriting classes, but in all those years of watching and analyzing family dynamics, of understanding what people really meant when they said things that sounded supportive but felt cruel. Shifting Light premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival 9 months later. The reviews were extraordinary. Critics called it a nuanced exploration of family trauma, praised the performances, and specifically mentioned the writing as authentic and emotionally sophisticated. Variety predicted it would be a serious contender for Emmy nominations. I walked the red carpet at the premiere, wearing a dress I'd bought at Nordstrom, not designer, but elegant enough that I felt confident in the photos. Reporters asked about my background, my inspiration for the story, my plans for future projects. I answered their questions honestly and discovered that I wasn't as uncomfortable being interviewed as I'd expected to be. The real validation came from other writers in the industry. Established screenwriters whose work I'd admired for years reached out to tell me how much the show had affected them. Directors sent scripts they thought I'd be right for. Agents from bigger firms started calling Marcus about representing me. 6 months after the Toronto premiere, Shifting Light was selected for the Cannes Film Festival. Not just as a market screening, but as an official selection in the series competition. It was recognition at the highest level of international cinema, the kind of prestige that could transform careers overnight. The Cannes invitation came with an offer to walk the red carpet at the festival's opening ceremony. Me, the girl who'd been told she wasn't pretty enough to compete with her sister, invited to one of the most glamorous events in the entertainment world. I said yes without hesitation. The festival organizers arranged for me to work with a stylist, who selected a custom Valentino gown in deep emerald that complemented my coloring in ways I'd never imagined possible. Professional hair and makeup artists transformed me into someone who looked like they belonged on red carpets, someone who photographed beautifully under the bright lights and constant attention. But the real transformation wasn't external. It was the confidence that came from knowing I'd earned my place there through my work, not my appearance or connections or family name. I belonged at Cannes because I'd written something that mattered to people, something that had been recognized by critics and audiences and industry professionals as worthy of attention. The night before the red carpet, I was in my hotel room overlooking the Mediterranean when my phone rang. It was Sophia. "I saw the Cannes announcement," she said. "That's incredible, Emma. I'm genuinely happy for you." Her tone was different than I'd heard in years. Softer, less calculated, almost vulnerable. "I owe you an apology," she continued. "For a lot of things, but especially for trying to discourage you from pursuing writing. I was wrong about what you were capable of, and I was wrong about what success in this industry looks like." She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "The truth is, I was scared. Scared that you were going to be better at this than I was, that you were going to succeed in ways I never could. I convinced myself that I was protecting you, but really I was protecting myself from having to compete with someone I knew was more talented than me." The admission was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. This was the sister who'd spent 20 years telling me I wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, or magnetic enough to compete with her. Now she was saying she'd been afraid of my potential all along. "You were always the one with the real talent," she said quietly. "The one who understood people, who could see past the surface to what was really happening underneath. I knew that, even when we were kids. That's why I worked so hard to convince you that those skills didn't matter." I felt tears starting, not from sadness, but from relief. The validation I'd been searching for my entire life, finally offered freely instead of having to be fought for or proven through achievement. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sorry for all of it, and I'm proud of you. Really genuinely proud of what you've accomplished." "Thank you," I managed to say. "That means everything to me." The next evening I stood at the edge of the red carpet in Cannes, wearing a gown worth more than my first car, about to walk past photographers and journalists from around the world. The girl who'd been told she'd never be as pretty as her sister was about to be photographed alongside some of the most beautiful and successful people in international cinema. But the real victory wasn't about beauty or glamour, or proving Sophia wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined, that the voice inside me that had always believed I could do meaningful work had been right all along. As I stepped onto the carpet and heard photographers calling my name, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been over the years. The invisible sister, the reliable daughter, the practical business student, the secret writer, the emerging screenwriter, and now this Emma, the one confident enough to walk among giants because she'd earned her place there. The cameras flashed and I smiled, not because I had to, but because I genuinely felt joy. Pure, uncomplicated happiness at being exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Sophia had been right about one thing. Some people are born knowing what they're meant to do. She just hadn't realized that I was one of them too. It had just taken me longer to figure out what that something was. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.